Johannes Zut, Country Head, World Bank Group, Bangladesh. Unfortunately, Mr. Zut could not be here today owing to sudden commitments in Nepal following the devastating earthquake the country experienced. Fortunately, Dr. M. Masuria's Program Manager, Trade and Competitiveness, World Bank Group, has consented to be present instead. I would like to call Dr. M. Masurias on the stage, please.
Thank you very much. Honorable Chief Guest, ICT Advisor, Mr. Wadud, Honorable State Minister for ICT Division, Ministry of Telecom, Post and Information Communication and Technology, respected speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is indeed a great pleasure and a privilege to be present here today amongst luminaries in the technology world, luminaries of the technology investors and the technology experts that have an active, acute interest in Bangladesh. I thank for their kind invitation to the World Bank Group. I would also like to congratulate the organizers for taking this very timely and critical initiative to come and talk about a very, very important potential sector for Bangladesh, which has got the potential not only to get Bangladesh up in the map in terms of business, but also to scale up ICT as an enabler across the spectrum, be it in the government or in the private sector or in citizen services and so on. And it is particularly interesting to sort of see the topic or the sort of conference title, Digital Economy or Digital Investment Summit. Now that is important for Bangladesh for many perspectives, but most importantly, again, as I say, it highlights a sector which is really the magic bullet for Bangladesh's future success. It is also something that talks about investments, which is really Bangladesh's critical incremental need to reach the middle income status by 2021, for which Bangladesh is very well positioned. And it also talks about investment from a digital perspective, digital investment. And that brings into the context what Bangladesh needs to step up its position in the global value chain, technology, innovation, and productivity increase owing from technology and innovation. So this is a great initiative and it's a great event to be in, and I'm privileged to be present here today. 10 minutes or so, I'm going to talk to you briefly about digital economy. As you can see, the sort of the cover of my presentation is creating a conducive environment, drivers and incentives for a digital economy. So, but before we get into the drivers and incentives and understand them a little more, actually some of that have been already touched upon by the previous speakers. But there are a few areas that we would like to touch upon that we thought are critical to take this wonderful initiative in Bangladesh, starting from digital concrete outcomes over the last 5 years to take it to the next step. But before that, let's talk about digital economy itself. What is digital economy? There is no authoritative definition, and it's problematic to define it very specifically. Usually, the most of the definitions circle around internet economy, which is the economic activities arising out of internet activities, or economic and social activities and outcomes derived through the use of ICT. But whatever the definition may be, the most important preamble for digital economy is that it is the result of transformational effects that emerge from use of general purpose ICT, information and communication technology, in the fields of ICT, and its transformational impact in all other sectors in a country, be that the economy or the social services or infrastructure. In the digital economy, it is all about ICT, communication technology, information technology, but there is one enabler which plays the role of the biggest catalyst, which is the access to internet. And that is valid globally in an equal term, whether it's South America, whether it's Eastern Europe, South Asia, or Eastern Asia. The internet, access to the internet remains the biggest catalyst to drive this digital economy. And the digital economy taking advantage of internet and other technologies have today emerged as the most important driver of innovation, competitiveness, and growth around the world. What is the size of this digital economy? I mean, the size itself gives you a sense how important this has become, how integrated this has become around the world as part of all the economies. It's more than $20 trillion, the size of the digital economy. Out of that, $16 trillion comes from e-commerce, business to business, business to citizens, and other aspects of the transactions. About $4 trillion comes from trading of digital goods and services, including production and so on. So what is the impact of such a mammoth and yet increasing economic aspect of the global economy? The Honorable ICT Advisor mentioned one of these in his speech. So there is a World Bank which points to the fact that, and evidence that every 10 additional mobile phones per 100 people will result in an additional 0.8% increase in the GDP. Then this very seminal research by Ericsson and Arthur D. Little, it refers to the 10% increase, the ever 10% increase in broadband penetration, leading to about 1 to 1.2% increase in the GDP. Then a very sort of own product of one of the organizers here today, Accenture, the Digital Density Index. It shows a very strong positive correlation between the Digital Density Index and the rate of GDP growth, directly correlated. Let's bring it closer to what Bangladesh needs, the Bangladesh's own development challenges. Jobs. Jobs have been higher paid, productive jobs have been really the single most popular of the Bangladesh's impressive economic growth over the last 2 decades. Bangladesh has about 2.2 million young people coming to the workforce every year. And Bangladesh needs to continue to provide cleaner, better, higher paid, and more productive jobs to these 2.2 million people, the young people, in order to not only maintain the impressive growth rate, but also to step it up to that of 7 or 8%, which is critical for Bangladesh to attain the middle income status by 2021. From the United States context, if we look at from a very developed perspective, more than $357 billion of digitally deliverable exports, which is about 17% of total exports from the United States. Coming to the other side of the spectrum, closer to India, a developing, close to middle income country. The global outsourcing services in 2014, $150 billion. About 100 billion or 2/3 of that was for exports, and which was 38% of India's total export. And jobs, 3.5 million direct employment. If we go into the multiplier effects and indirect employment, this is going to be in many fold bigger number. 1.2 million of that were women. And the Honorable Advisor also mentioned about the special government and the digital Bangladesh to integrate particularly the rural women into this entire digital ecosystem development, which is absolutely a much welcome news for Bangladesh. So digital economy, as you can see, it leads to digital jobs and digital tools. Now, these digital jobs are an increasing number of overall employment numbers, be that in the developed economies or developing economies. Multiplier effect of the jobs. Usually, if there is a formal sector that grows with sort of increasing employment, that not only benefits directly the economy, but the multiplier effect or spillover effect, if I'm allowed to use that, creates jobs in supporting sectors or other sectors which benefit in some way from the digital economy. And the ability of the digital jobs to create employment are between 2 to 4 times in other sectors. So that's a very, very powerful multiplier. And then digital economy also leads to digital tools, internet, payment gateways, many more. It facilitates urban, rural, educated, less educated, all parts of the population, as long as they're connected to the tool, to connect to better economic and social opportunities, labor market, land market, financial services, product markets, be that the farmer in the north of Bangladesh or a fisherman in the southwest of Bangladesh. Now, what are the drivers of this digital economy? Now, when we are talking about economy, it's very difficult to not to speak about supply and demand side of an economy. The most fundamental. Let's try to put it in the context of digital economy. What are some of the supply conditions that you need? There are 4 drivers. There are many more, but this is an attempt to sort of aggregate a number of them in line with their sort of rational, technical and logical rationale. Excuse me, I'm just recovering from cold, so I might occasionally the facilitating infrastructure, fulfillment infrastructure. When you go to the demand side, the consumer profile is the consumers ultimately who are pulling up the services and the goods which are being produced and delivered within the digital economy. So the on the demand conditions, the consumer profile, access, internet, technologies, digital tools determine a lot of digital economies growth. Government's direct institutional framework. A lot of those infrastructure, a lot of those demand conditions are also influenced by government's own initiatives. But something which is very directly linked to government's initiative is the institutional framework. And by institutional framework, we read the government services, decision making, quality of the decision making. So just immediate past speaker from Accenture mentioned about doing business. Those are investment climate or enabling environment for business specific issues and government's own digital ecosystem. And finally, I think innovation and change. What is the landscape for innovation? How supportive it is? So let's go a little bit deeper into that. Supply conditions. Many speakers before me have repeatedly, mobile network are really the backbones, providing the access to the communications and ICT platform. So Bangladesh has seen tremendous growth, tremendous quality of services in the mobile network, but this needs to keep growing at a faster rate in order to achieve the dreams and the visions of the digital Bangladesh. Internet bandwidth, the cost, availability, it's important. If you infrastructure, the cybersecurity or the financial services, much critical elements like e-payments, electronic payments, or payment transactions are going to be important. And then finally, bit of a jargon, fulfillment infrastructure. But these are basically mostly physical infrastructure supporting the growth of ICT industry. For example, the High-Tech Park, an initiative of the current government, excellent example. I mean, I've been talking to Mr. Shamsi a few weeks ago, and I was really, I got really concerned having known from him how he was finding it difficult sort of get cheap and competitive access to space or land in order to scale up Accenture business, which is Accenture's business strategy. So an initiative like High-Tech Park is a much welcome news. And once ready, this is going to provide this sort of fulfillment infrastructure in Bangladesh. As we have talked about mobile and telecommunication being the enabler, I mean, there are many aspects of technology to sort of take the sector up, but the telecom sector perhaps is the sort of most important enabler. It requires a regulatory framework, not only enabling, but also transparent and consistent so that the investors are able to plan for long term and operate competitively. And national telecommunications policy, again, another very, very timely and good initiative by the current government. It provides an excellent conduit to actually reflect some of this support that's going to be needed to the telecom sector in Bangladesh. We've talked about demand conditions, consumer profile. Bangladesh is uniquely positioned with a demographic during for last many years. We now have a huge number of working age young population to participate in economic activities and make money and spend their earnings in consumption, including that is going to be a huge driver for the digital economy in Bangladesh. Institutional environment, like in any country in the world, political stability are going to be in order to strengthen and then further step digital economy in the country. The doing business environment. This is how easy it is as a business to operate in a particular economy. Access to how easy it's to get a land or a space and register property. Paying cross borders, whether it's service or goods. Enforcement of contracts, a big, big issue around the world as well as in Bangladesh, directly linked to investors' confidence. And finally, the government's own digital ecosystem. And there, the digital Bangladesh vision, the activity and the program have been a superb enabler. It has actually opened up interest, awareness, ownership opportunities for many players, including in the government and the private sector and the citizens, to come and participate in the digital economy. I just want to quickly refer to one example. World Bank Group, through my unit, is engaged in a major tax reform work in the National Board of Revenue. And when we engaged them back in 2011, we knew that one of the reform element is going to be ICT-led. Transparency is usually very high in the world. Actually, this worked like a magic. The digital Bangladesh, call it a carrot or the stick, really helped us to get its penetration into the National Board of Revenue. And usually the tax authorities around the world, in our experience, in IMF's experience, are one of the most difficult to penetrate, particularly with ICT, which brings up transparency. But the digital Bangladesh made it happen. So where do all this take us for Bangladesh? What's more, it's on a fantastic trajectory as far as the beginning of a digital economy is concerned. However, it's still a long way to go before it becomes a really big destination for digital investment by foreign investors, Bangladeshi investors, excuse me, and the digital economy takes it to the gets to the next level. The beginning has been wonderful. The journey so far has been wonderful, but a few more steps are required. First of all, taxation regime. Every time we talk to investors, particularly from ICT and telecom sector, this comes up. This is not unique to Bangladesh. This happens in many other countries, but this is one of the big constraints in Bangladesh. Another very simple example. 2 or 3 years ago, I was talking to an advisor in the Indian Planning Commission, advisor to Dr. Montek Singh Ahulia, who was previously head of the Indian Tax Policy Unit. When Intel made the first approach or effort to set up business in India, and at that point, the rest of the Indian government was so keen on getting Intel in, they provided them most of what they have asked for. But when it came to the incentives, fiscal incentives, and it came to the tax policy unit, and as the head, this gentleman did not agree to what Intel was asking for. And he used to enjoy a lot of confidence of the then finance minister in Delhi. And his ruling prevailed, and Intel did not come into India. They went back and set up that particular factory in Israel. That gentleman 2 years ago, about 5 or 6 years after that Intel story, regretted very, very strongly when he was talking to me that I should have looked at the multiplier effects and not just looked at the tax gain for the government from that particular deal and so on. So the tax regime needs to be made much more friendly and specific to there are specific reforms or incentives which are going to be necessary for the telecom sector, but most importantly, predictability and consistency, continuity of the tax policies. I've talked to a number of people in this room in the past. They say they don't necessarily mind a higher tax rate. Obviously, it has to be competitive, but even the higher tax rate needs to be consistent. Because if there is change, that hurts their planning, investment planning decisions, and so on. The core policy regulatory environment, I mentioned the National Telecom Policy 2015 that's being drafted, excellent conduit to bring in. I think Honorable Advisor mentioned about the technology neutrality over there. It is a fantastic, it's going to be a fantastic impetus to the growth of the telecom sector in Bangladesh. Spectrum roadmap is something that's going to be very, very helpful. And licensing regime, again, not unique to Bangladesh, but Bangladesh needs it. But most developing middle income countries, even these days, some developed countries, the licensing regime is not so efficient. Transparency is also a problem somewhere. However, this is usually one of the first kind of entry barriers and that directly affects the investor confidence and so on. Many of the speakers mentioned skills development. World Bank at the moment is providing a direct support to the government of Bangladesh through the leveraging of ICT for growth, where the project will finance training of 30,000 young people for ICT skills and so on. And the Digital Bangladesh push to continue to mainstream the e-governance in the government work, government to government services, government to business services, government to citizen services are going to be extremely helpful. So I'll end there, and thank you again for your time, and thanks to the organizers for their kind invite. I wish all the success to this investment summit.
Thank you, Dr. Riaz, for your presentation. We are almost at the end of our second session. However, we are going to have a short panel discussion on key priorities to foster investment and continued digitalization for all in Bangladesh. And to moderate the discussion, I would like to invite Mr. Shamim Ahsan, President of PACES, and the panelists up on stage and take their seats, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would now like to invite the panelists for this session. Honorable ICT Advisor, Mr. Sajib Wajed, CEO of Telenor Group, John Frederick Baxas, from Accenture, Joseph Janelli, from Huawei, Jeremy Thompson, and Dr. Masroor Riaz from World Bank IFC. So we had a very wonderful and inspiring presentations since morning from all our panelists, and it assures that the government's plan for Digital Bangladesh initiative is on the right track. So to discuss this further, I will start with our Honorable ICT Advisor. So from the speakers, we hear very positive things, bringing the greater part of the population online, and so as a part of your Digital Bangladesh vision, how do you see in the future bringing all the people under internet?
Well, our government, is this on? So one of the concepts was first, of course, the digital centers, which the concept of it was to build a cyber cafe around the country where people could access. So that has already happened. One of the challenges we're facing now, as the consumption of content has grown and as more people are accessing the internet, is the lack of bandwidth in those locations. So for example, in the cities now, we have very good 3G coverage, very good bandwidth. But now we are trying to get the private operator especially, and the government is doing it on its own initiative, the Bangladesh Telecom Corporation Limited, to take our goal is to take fiber optic cable down to every union, to each and every one of those unions in the country by the end of this 5-year term.
Thank you, Mr. Wajid. John Baxos, your company is supporting a number of markets in Asia and Europe, and all of there are good opportunities and actively taking advantage of the digital economy. So how do you evaluate Bangladesh's efforts in this regard, and what are the learnings from other markets Bangladesh can learn from?
That's a very wide question. But let me try to focus this into to some topics that has been on this platform today. Digitalization happens in every economy. And the connectivity part that has been developed on 2G and 3G over the years in Bangladesh doesn't necessarily lag neighboring countries. We could say that 4G is deployed in Japan, Korea, China, United States, and the Nordic countries, and there is a second wave, Huawei called it, for Europe. And the maturity for 4G is building up. But every economy we have seen has basically built the different Gs upon each other. 4G now, we've heard, yes, we want 4G, and 4G will only happen if there are frequencies for 4G. And now net neutrality, technology neutral spectrum is coming through. And if that happens, then 4G is around the corner as well. But remember, we are only halfway, if that much, from 3G. As announced, there are more to happen both on 3G before 4G becomes a reality, and basically these technologies will work in parallel, at least for a period of time. And the handset generation, the handset side also needs to come with it. So it takes a period of time before it develops. But if we compare in Thailand in these days, this explosion is on. 4G is in the initial stages, and the competition both for coverage and future customer service position is really on. And one could say that the Thai market is somewhat ahead of this market in some perspective, but not necessarily aspects of it. So I would rank the possibilities of seeing the ICT developing the way we have discussed it this morning to happen. Basically, all of us say there is an open door, and behind that open door, there is a digitized society where capacities, competencies here in this country can be developed into a great potential. That's what we're saying. And this potential both goes for the country's own need, but also with the potential of creating a new and important export sector. Primarily on the service side first, in the first round, I guess. Whether there are also manufacturing capacities, I want to address that one. That might very well be so. But let's begin on the service side, because we believe there are some strong seeds in the Bangladesh economy to move in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baxas. Accenture has been in Bangladesh for last 2. So how was the experience so far, and what can be the learnings for other global players? Because the government's vision is to bring investment and other global players to set up their PPO and R&D center. So what can be the learning?
Well, I think that in the last years was a very interesting experience. Obviously, the partnership with Telenor was a strong backbone of this development. Integrating the center in our global delivery network, I think was in the average of what we experience in the different countries. So obviously integrating culture, process systems is very important, but this has been done in a successful way. The key factor is this is a business where you need to have a critical mass in people, and I think that was mentioned before, the balance of demand and supply is going to be very important in order to facilitate this development. So obviously incentivized international demand to come in Bangladesh is going to be very important in the sense that if I observe India today, probably 10% of the India industry come from domestic demand, while 90% come from outside. So in terms of job creation and demand, obviously, the foreigner demand is going to be very important from international players. And companies that establish captive centers in IT or in BPO, obviously under a number of people is not economical. So it's important, obviously, to have critical mass and players that can facilitate sustainable development of talent and skills.
Okay, a complementary question regarding skills. Accenture has a world-class training institutes for training their own people, and the ICT industry, the ICT division basis, they have some initiatives to develop 6,000 professionals. So do you see a lot of collaboration with companies like Accenture, and how we can work together?
Yeah, absolutely. I think provides a lot of new hired in terms of, I think that for which the university education is, I think, okay, satisfactory, good. And then obviously Accenture, I also experience people as well. I think we discussed yesterday that obviously in the context of the initiative of the government, education on the job can be a formula that can accelerate and make the training more effective. Because obviously a company like Accenture know what is the demand of skill for the next 3 years in terms of technology, in terms of capabilities. Because we have global clients like, I don't know, Google, HP, Telenor, that obviously give us a perspective of what is going to be relevant in the years to come.
Thank you. Dr. Mashur Riaz, so as you know, the government's vision is to build
enabling environment for ICT sector, for a digital economy, other sectors in the digital economy is paramount. Everybody has an important role. I think the enabling role is the primary responsibility of the government, which will come through mainly policy, legal, regulatory environment, as well as the at a rate, the exchange rate policy or regime do you have? How good a monetary policy do you have? Is it expansionary of businesses or Now, Bangladesh is doing 10 to 12 years. Which will provide the enabling provisions can done. We will have to look at the ICT strategy as well as the policy, which Bangladesh has developed a good one, but use as practice, you keep updating them because the environment is changing continuously, both domestic as well as international, where the fund will be competing. So there needs to be continuous assessment of the strategic validity of these ICT, similar policies, and so on. The spectrum roadmap is going to be hugely, hugely important for the investors who are going to come into Bangladesh. And then there are obviously the overarching strategies around skills development that Bangladesh needs for its entire economic journey to the next level. Skills are going to be important, be that RMG, but it's going to be more important in digital economy. You're dealing with technology, the level of sophistication is going to be different. So the skills are the national skills aligned to the ICT overall doing business environment. And how do you fix the tax, how to export clearance or an import clearance or an input or a capital machine that's necessary for your ICT or telecom business in Bangladesh. Bangladesh's current perspective in Bangladesh, and they get into some sort of disputes either with the tax authority or with the government or another business partner or contractor. Lack of quick efficiency formally in a very developed system address that. However, in developing countries like Bangladesh, the legal system is overburdened with many litigations and other resource constraints. So in such economies, you have a mechanism. Those are going to be important, and this enforcement of contract has been a big on Bangladesh's or competitive immediately lowers lack of an environment where contracts can be enforced effectively, quickly, can immediately erode investors' level. Great, because the broader trade logistics, everything will have to be developed. Thank you.
Johnson from Hawaii. So, Mr. Steven, on the digital Bangladesh to date, how do you see the mobile broadband support to fulfill government vision?
government, as we heard this morning, huge, both in terms of resource, in Bangladesh, you have a very healthy supply chain for the mobile, and that is a great, you can further of those speed. I'm not sure develop products. We develop in the lab. We don't really consider too much about how people are going to will adopt mobile. And as we learn earlier on, what other people will teach them. So I believe to the ambitions of the Bangladesh government.
Thank you. Mr. Sajeev was we see yourself as a private sector person to take our industry forward and reaching that $1 billion target of export?
Whenever I've had, we've held many such summits and will continue to do so. And we've also have given the IT industry in Bangladesh a big boost. And the number one complaint we come across, besides either the, as we've discussed eventually with fiber to the union, 3G, 4G, will be able to solve some of those infrastructure problems. But the number one other complaint we always receive is, of course, access to capital. Now, I've been in the old Silicon Valley, I've been in the US, and the business model there in the IT industry is very different. So typically a startup is not going to have the capital to grow to expand its scale, and especially for an IT startup, even there, it is difficult to access capital from traditional methods via bank loans, because you don't have much to provide as collateral. You're a lot of expatriates who are in Silicon Valley. There's been it to Bangladesh. And of course, there's a huge Indian population there as well who are, and they've wanted to come. So we've been trying over time Mr. Shamim Masan, you yourself have brought a venture fund. I know that there were our exchange commission to try to keep their profits, and we're trying to promote. At the same time, from the government side as well, we've taken many initiatives. We have an EEF fund that's provided by the government of Bangladesh for small to medium companies that are starting up in Bangladesh, especially for the IT sector. And we're providing direct loans to many of these small entrepreneurs, small freelancers throughout the country.
Thank you, Mr. Sajid Wajid. And he was just mentioning that a Silicon Valley-based company named Phoenix Venture Capital, and they have announced a $200 million fund to invest in Bangladesh. They already started investing in Prio.com and negotiating with other companies. And that was because for last 5 years, Honorable go to different continents, venture capitalists in the one company and others will follow. We also know that it's
today into the space of digital services of tomorrow and of the future. So it's a kind of small bet, so to speak, to be present in the service space of internet. But let me allow to pick up a couple of points that was mentioned by the other people. On what Accenture is doing on capacities that are within overall message. But this Friday, non-site was given. Thank you.
thank you. Generally, so you know, Bangladesh is trying to brand as a IT destination.
About the concept of the digital image as actually the way we see digital really as a transformational storm, moving business from one place to the other. So in a couple of years, it's going to be difficult to say what is digital and what is not, because everything is going to be digital. So in this sense, the potential for Bangladesh is not only the digital economy, but is
another space, namely that of digital gaming. And today there are more more people engaged in digital service development and value creation in Finland than it was during the high days of Nokia. So again, one utilize national capacities, and then if we take these two examples into Bangladesh, now we say there is a national capacity in this country to develop an area that a global leader, Accenture, is already active in. Then we're talking about it and willingness to go. There is
We're running out of time. Can you take two questions from Okay. Can you please introduce yourself and the quick question?
Mr. I just wanted to know you have an uh, kind of understanding that in the high-end side, whether you have some, if I may say that
The point I said about Finland was gaming, and the other one was cybersecurity in sort of redirecting the workforce in such a direction. If ideas are good on mobile gaming locally, I'm pretty sure that Asians will understand Asian mindset better than Finns. Traction in Asia. So if you can understand Asian sentiment to gaming over the mobile platform, I think that's by far the most important ingredients for you to get Finnish partners.
Thank you, Mr. Baksas. And we see that we find niche in mobile application development as well as the other is graphic design. Our basis member companies are doing really well. With the mobile application and gaming, we see a lot of natural partnership with Telenor and subsidiaries. So any last concluding remarks from the panelists? So just within 1 minute. And also touch upon, you see the demand for 4G. How soon do you see the demand?
Demand for 4G we see is happening very rapidly globally. Here in Bangladesh, we see it following a very similar trend. I've been forecasting adoption of mobile for over 20 years. In fact, 20 years ago, I was working with Telenor in Europe, and we've consistently underestimated our customers' demand for bandwidth. And I think we'll probably do the same in Bangladesh as well. I think two things that are really critical for Bangladesh. One is that the price points for customers is, as we mentioned earlier on, the lowest in the world. But you still have a healthy supply of carriers. That's a really great asset, I think, for Bangladesh. I think for the 4G world, we probably need a very, very keen price for the smartphone. And then the applications that we've been talking about in terms of games, small businesses, we haven't mentioned much about small business, small SME market will benefit hugely from a mobile infrastructure. So I think the next bit that needs to happen, and I think there are already moves in Bangladesh, is a supply of a really low cost, so $50 or less smartphone. And then I think we'll see a massive adoption.
Any last comment, Dr. Riaz?
Just one, I mean, it's honorable advisor, and I think Mr. Baksas also mentioned the issue of capital, access to capital. I missed that while I was talking about the issues that you sort of inquired about. Now, this is a welcome news, Mr. Advisor, that there will be a small cap exchange. I think that's a big step forward. But overall, the private equity environment in Bangladesh will have to open up. We know within the World Bank Group, the IFC's investment banking wing, the investment wing, have been trying to scale up its private equity investment in Bangladesh. It has been very difficult because of a number of regulatory barriers, something to do with the Securities Exchange Commission, a few to do with taxation regime, a few to do with the central bank. So this access to capital is a specialized nature of access to capital need for tech companies. So it will have to have a vibrant private equity market in Bangladesh. And for that, opening up of the private equity market is going to be very important. But overall, I think I sort of agree with what Honorable Advisor said. Number of policies already in place, but it's just now looking forward what more is needed and how do you coordinate among the policies? Because often in the developing economies, one of the neglected or unseen failure is the policies don't talking to each other, and thereby the blind spots getting created and something coming in the way.
But you'll be happy to hear that Honorable ICF has already announced that the venture capital policy draft is already in place, and within next 1 month, the final policy will be in place. So there's going to be a big breakthrough for bringing all the venture capital companies to Bangladesh. Mr. Janali, concluding remarks?
Well, I guess that the digital roadmap led by the government over time of what capabilities, what enablers is going to impact more the different business, this can be a very important catalyst to facilitate the development. And then I think the business opportunity will come because this will create some local demand at the same time, and entrepreneurship in different domains, mobile gaming and others, will take advantage of both the domestic and the international demand as well. So this digital roadmap is a very important dimension.
Mr. Baksaras, you already have vision to connect 50 million GP subscribers by 2017.
Yeah, that vision is already underway, I think, and it might very well happen that things happen faster. This has to be to do also with the connectivity level here, and more bandwidth. With more bandwidth and affordable handsets, then there is an explosion in usage. We've seen that in every market. So my pledge here, as the final word, is access to spectrum for the industry. That's the number one, on terms and conditions that incentivize investments in a reasonable balance. Then there is tax regimes that and incentives regimes that are there and handle this in a balanced way. The international connectivity is important, in particular if we're going to be successful on creating a business process industry delivery hub from Bangladesh. And the final comment then, and more generally, stability, consistency, and incentive-based, level playing field in short. So a lot of things to address and a lot of opportunities.
So we'd like to conclude with your final remarks.
Yeah. Well, one of the key themes that always comes up in discussion between industry and the government and advisory bodies such as the World Bank, of course, is this issue, as we've heard again. And this is something Mr. Baksaras touched on quite extensively in his own presentation, is the conflicting demands, requirements, and sort of visions, if you will, of policy, taxation, pricing, etc. But the key there is always to try to find a balance, and that is what our government has always striven to do. Obviously, we want open markets. We believe in a free market economy. At the same time, we want to keep competition alive. We don't want the market, we don't want any market failures, we don't want any monopolies. We want to keep a very competitive market. We've touched upon, towards that end, lifting a lot of the regulatory hurdles, and our government has slowly been in the process of modernizing. The telecom policy we inherited wasn't ours. It was made by the previous government, and frankly, it was a mess. But then you have licenses that have been issued for 15 years, so how do you transition? You cannot just change the policy overnight, because then it would cause chaos in the market. With spectrum, again, resource management, we've tried to look at different models around the world, and this is where a lot of the this is one key difference between our government and perhaps other policies that have been taken around the world. You see, the IT sector is a brand new sector. If you look at tax policies have been around for 200 years, 300 years. They have developed over hundreds of years, where there's really not a lot new in the tax policies. If you look at the IT sector, if you just, this issue of spectrum management, that has really been an issue only for the last 20 years. Mobile industry didn't exist before that. There was no mobile telecommunications. The question of spectrum allocation and didn't exist. So in terms of world best practice, one of the things we have come to the realization is, because it's such a brand new industry, there is no such thing as best practice. Other countries have tried. If you look at spectrum management, first there was the model of giving it away free to let the industry grow, which Bangladesh did initially. Then Western countries went to the model of open market auction, which our neighbor India then tried, and it was not very successful because the prices weren't supported by the market. So in Bangladesh, we have tried to find a balance where it's not, we can't give it away free, we can't give it away at extremely low cost, but we also don't want a US Western style auction or the kind that India followed it to be sustainable. So for us, it has always been about finding innovative solutions targeted to our domestic needs, to what will work best in Bangladesh. And we have tried to do that in consultation with the industry, with the private sector, as well as our own stakeholders within the government. In a democratic system, different parts of the government are always going to have their different demands. The tax regime, the tax administrators are going to have different demands than the ICT ministry. And it's always resolved through negotiations. And these policies, nothing is ever set in stone, but we believe we are making progress in every sector, in the right sector. The ultimate goal of negotiation is if everyone's a little bit unhappy, then it was a successful negotiation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wajid, Mr. Baksas, Mr. Janali, Mr. Thompson, Dr. Riyad, and a wonderful audience. Let us continue to work together to make Bangladesh the #1 digital investment destination. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank the moderator and the panelists for a wonderful session. And now, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our second session. And we are going to take a break for lunch, which will be served in about 10 minutes. Meanwhile, I would request you kindly mingle outside in the foyer while we set up the tables. Looking forward to seeing you in the next session after lunch. Thank you.